watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Nipakshi Kurala. We're live from New Delhi, watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Nipakshi Kurala, coming up in the next 30 minutes. UN Chief Antonio Guterres condemns both the use of civilians as human shields and bombing of southern Gaza after an evacuation order. Israeli diplomats respond angrily to remarks made by Guterres. US Republicans select Mike Johnson as their next speaker nominee in a secret ballot vote after a long stalemate. Newly formed Thai government mulls over buying a frigate instead of a Chinese submarine. Severe cyclonic storm Hamoon hits Bangladesh's southeastern coast. And in sports, Australia to take on Netherlands in the ICC Men's Cricket World Cup today. First up, the top story, we're tracking the latest on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Moving on, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations has called for the head of the UN to resign over his comments about the conflict in Gaza. In a tense meeting of the UN Security Council, Secretary General Antonio Guterres said Hamas' attack on October 7th did not happen in a vacuum. In response, Israel said he was justifying terrorism. According to Gaza's Ministry of Health, more than 5,000 people have been killed in the Strip since 7th of October. Some 1,400 people have been killed in Israel, with more than 200 hostages still being held in Gaza. Sally Patterson reports from New York, where the United Nations is headquartered.
Addressing the United Nations Security Council, Secretary-General Antonio Guterres didn't mince his words. He said he had condemned unequivocally the, quote, horrifying and unprecedented acts of terror by Hamas in Israel. Nothing, he said, can justify the deliberate killing, injuring and kidnapping of civilians. He went on to say it is important to recognise the, quote, attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. He said the Palestinian people had been subjected to 56 years of occupation. Now, Israel's UN ambassador, Gilad Erdan, described Guterres' speech as shocking. And in a post on X, formerly known as Twitter, he called on him to immediately resign. His comments, Erdan said, constitute a, quote, justification for terrorism and murder. Israel's Foreign Minister Eli Cohen was in New York as well for the Security Council debate, but he said he'd cancelled his meeting with Guterres following the speech.
Saturday, October 7, will go down in history as nothing less than a brutal massacre. Saturday, October 7, is a wake-up call for the entire free world. A wake-up call against extremism and terror.
Meanwhile, member states called for de-escalation, with the United Kingdom warning attacks by Hezbollah on Israel's northern border and rising tensions in the West Bank could signal the wider region could become engulfed by war. US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was also in attendance, and he stressed there would be repercussions if the situation spiraled further. Now, concerns were also raised about the humanitarian crisis continuing to unfold in Gaza. Guterres said that while some supplies are now getting into the Strip, it is a drop of aid in an ocean of need.
Thankfully, some humanitarian relief is finally getting into Gaza, but it is a drop of aid in an ocean of need. In addition, our UN fuel supplies in Gaza will run out in a matter of days, and that would be another disaster. Without fuel, aid cannot be delivered, hospitals will not have power, and drinking water cannot be purified or even pumped.
UN fuel supplies will run out in a matter of days, he warned, calling that a disaster. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
Well, Iran has also criticized the US and the UN Security Council for blaming Tehran for the Israel-Hamas conflict. Iran accused the US of escalating the conflict by aiding Israel at the expense of the Palestinians.
Today, the US Secretary of State once again attempted to wrongly place the blame on Iran. Iran categorically rejects these groundless allegations. Our commitment to the regional peace and stability remains unwavering. The US has further exacerbated the conflict by overtly aligning itself with the aggressor at the expense of the innocent Palestinian population.
Iran, addressing the UN Security Council, expressed deep concerns over the Israel-Hamas war and pledged ongoing support for Palestine. During the first open debate on the conflict, Council members called for an immediate ceasefire and humanitarian aid for Palestinians. However, no resolution has been reached, raising fears of further escalation. India's DPR to the UN, Ambassador R. Ravindra, voiced distress over the worsening security situation and civilian casualties in the war.
India is deeply concerned at the deteriorating security situation and large-scale loss of civilian lives in the ongoing conflict. Our Prime Minister was one of the first global leaders to have conveyed his condolences for the loss of lives and prayers for the innocent victims and their families. India has sent 38 tons of humanitarian goods, including medicines and equipment, to the people of Palestine. In these challenging times, India will continue to send humanitarian assistance to the people of Palestine.
Well, 2 Palestinians were killed in Israeli drone strike in the occupied West Bank. Israeli forces launched an overnight raid at Jenin refugee camp where armed Palestinians allegedly hurled explosives at the troops. The Jenin refugee camp, a stronghold of Palestinian militants, has been the focus of a major Israeli military operation earlier this year. And in a critical development, the Palestine Red Crescent Society received its 4th batch of humanitarian aid consisting of food, water, medicine and fuel from its Egyptian counterpart at the Rafah crossing. This aid comes as supplies in Gaza have reached critically low levels due to the ongoing Israeli siege. And Israel's military said its jet struck Syrian army infrastructure and mortar launchers early on Wednesday in what it described as a response to rocket launches from Syria towards Israel. The military said it had identified 2 rocket launchers from Syria that had landed in open areas late on Tuesday and that it had responded with artillery fire at the sources of the launches. The military did not provide further details. It did not accuse Syria's army of firing the 2 rockets which set off air raid sirens in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights on Tuesday. There was no immediate comment from Syria. Israel has traded fire with Lebanon's Hezbollah and militants in Syria in recent days, a wider conflict over its northern border as it battles Islamist Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip following a deadly attack in Israel. And earlier, we spoke to DD India correspondent Amritpal Singh on the situation prevailing there. Here is what he has reported from the ground.
That's right. It's day 19 of the conflict, and Israel has intensified its military campaigns, continues to fire targets inside the Gaza Strip. In fact, the Israeli Defense Forces say that last night itself they fired 400 targets within the Gaza Strip. Hamas officials are to be believed 700 people have died in the Gaza Strip in the last 2 days due to intensified airstrikes. But what Israel is doing is it's also the Israel Defense Forces and the Israel Air Force is dropping leaflets inside the Gaza Strip, asking people to move away because they will intensify their strikes, move towards the south. They say those who do not move will be treated as collaborators, and and they'll be responsible for their own deaths. Even while it does so, it's also throwing leaflets and audio messages, broadcasting audio messages inside the Gaza Strip, asking for specific information about where Hamas is holding the hostages, saying promising protection and money to the people living in Gaza. The Israeli Defense Forces are saying to get the hostages released. They see this as a measure of cooperation from the Gazan civilians. But the reports coming out of there, if they are to be believed, that's not cutting much ice, because people are facing the brunt of the Israeli strikes. And also, Hamas, there is a certain amount of scare of the Hamas. So the civilian people are caught between the devil and the deep sea and are the worst sufferers in this. As far as international diplomacy goes, Emmanuel Macron was here yesterday. He met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the President and stressed upon the need for he first of all, reiterated France's support for Israel, but said, and in fact went on to the extent of saying that the wider coalition against ISIS needs to now start working on Hamas, treating Hamas the same way as the world looks at ISIS. So clearly drawing a comparison between them. But he also said that the first objective is to get the hostages released and see how a civilian population of Palestine's suffering can be reduced. So really, pressurizing the Benjamin Netanyahu government to take measures to reduce civilian casualties while expressing his support with Israel. Now, interestingly, the UN chief statement yesterday saying that the Hamas attacks didn't happen in a vacuum has, ruffled feathers here, with Israel calling for the UN Secretary General to resign immediately, saying that he stands with terrorists. So that has put a spin. But the Western nations are pressurizing Benjamin Netanyahu not to go in for a ground assault, even as the demand for the Israeli forces going in and fighting Hamas grows by the day here.
And moving on, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim joined thousands of pro-Palestinian supporters in Kuala Lumpur to condemn Israeli strikes in Gaza. Malaysia has long been a vocal supporter of the Palestinian cause and has called for a two-state solution to the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. The country does not have diplomatic relations with Israel. Also calling for peace in Gaza, hundreds of Jordanians gathered outside the Al-Khaloti Mosque in Amman to show support for the people of Gaza on Tuesday. The protesters waved flags and chanted slogans. The World Health Organization called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire to prevent food, medicines and fuel supplies from running out in Gaza. And the United States appealed for a humanitarian pause in the Israel-Hamas war to allow safe deliveries of aid to civilians on Tuesday. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said a ceasefire will benefit Hamas at this stage. Kirby described Israel's concerns as legitimate. Further, he added that no fuel has been delivered to Gaza amid concerns from Israel about the possibility of a diversion of fuel deliveries by Hamas. The United States is negotiating with Israel, neighboring Egypt and the UN to smooth emergency deliveries into Gaza.
We want, as I said from the beginning, we want to see all measure of protection for civilians, and pauses in operation is a tool and a tactic that can do that for temporary periods of time.
So does that mean
that is not the same as saying a ceasefire? Again, right now, we believe a ceasefire benefits Hamas, a general ceasefire.
And now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. A Panamanian court has upheld former President Ricardo Martinelli's prison sentence of over 10 years in a money laundering case. Martinelli is a front-runner in the Central American country's presidential election next year. One crew member died and 4 are missing after 2 freighters collided in the North Sea off the coast of Germany, according to the Maritime Emergency Authority. The body has been recovered along with 2 surviving crew members. The ships collided at around 300 GMT, about 12 nautical miles southwest of Germany's Heligoland archipelago. Over 3 tons of cocaine has been seized off the coast of Peru. Police have arrested 6 people in 2 anti-drug operations. Police say the drug consignment was transported by sea from the north of the country to Central America and the United States. Scientists from Peru and Poland unveiled the face of a girl whose mummified remains were found in the Peruvian Andes in 1995. Experts reconstructed the face of the girl using 3-dimensional technology. The girl is believed to be around 15 years of age. The Breadstone World Solar Challenge in Australia's Darwin City brings together teams from across the globe to participate in an over 1,800-mile-long race and push the limits of technological innovation. Teams are usually comprised of university students who engineer and build the vehicles. The event is designed to showcase a variety of forward-looking EV technologies. This year, prototype Breadstone tires are being tested. And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Thailand considers replacing Chinese submarine with frigate. Cyclone Hamoon has crossed Bangladesh's southeastern coast, Chittorgram and Cox's Bazar at midnight. And Australia will take on the Netherlands in the ICC Men's Cricket World Cup today in Delhi.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such change makers.
Watch Change Makers on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Vipakshi Khurana, and moving on, the newly formed Thai government is mulling over buying a frigate instead of a Chinese submarine. This comes as the Chinese manufacturer proposed to replace the German engines with Chinese-made equipment. Thailand has already paid an installment of about $200 million to China for the purchase of one of the 3 Yuan-class S-26T submarines with German-made diesel engines. But the deal was delayed as Germany banned the use of its engine for Chinese military exports. And China has removed its defense minister, General Li Shangfu, who has been absent from public view for 2 months. Li's removal is the second such instance in the Chinese government in 3 months after the ousting of Qin Gang as the foreign minister. Since no replacement for Li has been announced, China is left with no defense minister. China has appointed Lan Fuan as the new finance minister as per media reports. Lan was named the Communist Party chief at the finance ministry last month. He has succeeded Liu Kun, who had been finance minister since 2018. Well, the U.S. Republicans have selected Mike Johnson as the next Speaker nominee in a secret ballot vote on Tuesday. Republican Tom Emmer dropped out of the race just hours after he was selected as the latest GOP nominee. Mike is the 4th nominee put forward after 3 others failed to win enough support from colleagues, and the 2nd nominee of the day. Johnson was selected after 3 rounds of voting. The House has been without a speaker and has been unable to pass bills since Kevin McCarthy was ousted as on 3rd of October. And cooperation on critical minerals and bolstering infrastructure for the Pacific Islands will be on the agenda as Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanes begins a 4-day visit to Washington. He received a lavish welcome at the White House as US President Biden looks to strengthen the relationship with Australia as part of his strategy to counter China's influence in the Indo-Pacific. DD India's Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
As the Biden administration is increasingly caught up in dealing with conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, the Australian leader's state visit will refocus its foreign policy back to the Indo-Pacific and its long-term interest in countering the rise of China. This state visit will include Prime Minister Albanese's 9th meeting with President Joe Biden in the past 16 months, showing just how important the relationship is for the US. For Australia, making progress on the AUKUS submarine deal will be a priority. The trilateral accord with the UK would give Australia access to nuclear-powered submarines for the first time, and it's widely seen as a counter to China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region. But the pact faces hurdles in the US Congress, with Prime Minister Albanese saying that he'll meet US lawmakers every day that he's in Washington to highlight the need for progress. He also told reporters that he's focused on extending Australia's security alliance with the US into an economic and technology partnership as well. They will discuss a critical minerals task force to boost private investment in Australia's rare earths industry and to reduce global reliance on China. They'll also discuss infrastructure projects for the Pacific Islands. But Ukraine and the Middle East will also be on the agenda, of course, with the US president keen to show that he can manage the crises at hand while also furthering the US's long-term foreign policy objectives. Kate Fisher in Washington reporting for DD India.
And Hungary's foreign minister said that the country's parliament will make a sovereign decision regarding the ratification of Sweden's NATO bid. The minister gave the statement after speaking with his Turkish counterpart. The minister added that this will not change Hungary's position in any way. Sweden applied last year to join the defence alliance, but Turkey and Hungary have yet to approve the bid. Dozens of young Crimean conscripts left for the start of their active duty in the Russian army on Tuesday. A ceremony was held at an assembly point in the city of Simferopol in Russian-controlled Crimea. At least 130,000 new recruits were called up for statutory military service during the autumn draft campaign. A total of 2,000 men from Crimea are expected to join the ranks of the Russian army. All men in Russia are required to do a year-long military service or equivalent training while in higher education. And Bolivian firefighters and volunteers continue to battle the fires raging in the forest close to Madidi National Park, a protected area in northwestern Bolivia. According to a government report, there are 16 active forest fires in 4 departments of Bolivia, with the La Paz region having the most significant affected area. The fire has consumed extensive crops and is now approaching Madidi National Park, one of the country's most important biodiversity reserves. The authorities have deployed helicopters to help firefighters on the ground. And South Korea plans to launch a nationwide vaccination campaign to contain an outbreak of lumpy skin disease in cattle after 29 cases have been reported since the first outbreak last week. Authorities are in talks with domestic and foreign companies to secure 4 million doses of vaccine by the end of this month. The highly infectious viral disease, which causes blisters and reduces milk production, is transmitted by blood-sucking insects such as mosquitoes, ticks and flies. It does not pose a risk to humans. Moving on, Hurricane Otis is set to hit Mexico's coast as a Category 5 storm, making it an extremely dangerous one. As per U.S. National Hurricane Center, the hurricane, which was already in Category 4 on Tuesday, reached 233 kilometers per hour in maximum sustained wind speed. The center also further added that the hurricane conditions are expected within 12 to 24 hours for the stretch of coastline, causing flash flooding and mudslides, which possibly would be a life-threatening storm surge. And Cyclone Hamoon has crossed Bangladesh's southeastern coast, Chattogram and Cox's Bazar at midnight. As per Bangladesh's weather department, the cyclone storm moved northeastward and completed crossing the coast in the early morning today. The cyclone has weakened into a land-deep depression near southeastern port city of Chattogram. According to the weather department, the deep depression is likely to move further inland and weaken gradually by giving precipitation. And IAEA DG Rafael Marino Grossi and Prime Minister Modi met in New Delhi. Grossi praised India's responsible use of nuclear power and its advancement in nuclear science. He acknowledged India's global leadership role in civil nuclear applications for societal benefits. IAEA chief also met India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar earlier in the day. PM Modi emphasized India's commitment to safe and sustainable nuclear energy. Grossi is also expected to visit nuclear facilities in Mumbai. And Union Minister Dr. Jitendra Singh held a mid-campaign progress review on Swachh Bharat Special Campaign 3 today in national capital New Delhi. During this press conference, Singh explained about recycling on wheels and its benefits, which aligns perfectly with the objective of fostering a cleaner India.
We created a kind of a vehicle, a large vehicle of the size of a bus, which has been named recycling on wheels. So it recycles it within a short span of time and brings out a raw material which can be then used in the paper industry, even the plastic industry. So it disposes of, at the same time creates wealth.
And now let's take a look at other stories making news today. The 5G and Beyond Hackathon 2023 is going to be held in New Delhi on Wednesday, giving a winning amount of 1 lakh rupees. The goal of the hackathon is to identify and promote applications relevant to India in the 5G and beyond realm. 2 Indian-American scientists, Ashok Gadgil and Subra Suresh, have been awarded the national medals in the fields of science and technology by US President Joe Biden. Ashok Gadgil was awarded the National Medal of Technology and Innovation, and Subra Suresh was awarded the National Medal of Science. And now we tell you about what is in store for Cricket World Cup today. Austria will play against the Netherlands at Arun Jaitley Stadium in New Delhi today. Australia looks set to welcome back Travis Head from injury, while the Netherlands need some runs from the top order. And Quinton de Kock continues his sublime touch in the World Cup with his third 100 of the tournament in just 5 innings. The wicket-keeper batter smashed a brilliant 174 as South Africa piled up 382 for 5 against Bangladesh. De Kock saw him own the record of highest score for a designated wicket-keeper in World Cup history, going past Adam Gilchrist 149 in the 2007 finals against Sri Lanka. The left-handed batter also became the first South African batter to score 3 centuries in a single World Cup. And International Artist Day honors artists and the contributions they make to us, the society. The day also pays homage to one of the most celebrated artists of the last century, Pablo Picasso, on his birth anniversary. DD India's correspondent Kriti Vadhera reports.
This year, UNESCO encouraged International Artist Day by the theme Art is Good for Health, so as to promote the importance of art in our lives. Inspired by the Cubism art form of Picasso, Dr. Neerja Chandana Peters, a medical practitioner, left her 2 decades medical career to pursue her passion towards art as full-time artist. Her artistic journey is published in many prominent international journals and magazines.
Being an Indian artist, you have abundant of international exposure also. So how many countries you have represented India?
I have been fortunate in representing India in 42 countries so far. Recently had a solo exhibition in United States of America. And I've exhibited in UK, in Turkey, Philippines, and many more countries. If it is your passion, then come what may, you must follow it.
Art became a form of meditation for her, as she found her language and spiritual heritage through abstract geometry.
With the rich ethnicity of India, numerous Indian artists are leaving their artistic imprints on global canvas. With camera person Vishwabandhu, I'm Kriti Vadhera, reporting from New Delhi for DD India.
Well, that's all for this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Lipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.